Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about Agile and Scrum, so let's get into it. So the question in question was, Frederick, what do you think about about Scrum, Agile slash Scrum? It seems like Agile is used pretty much everywhere these days. Do you think this actually implemented correctly in a company? In companies, do you think it's really bringing benefits, or is it more of a religious infatuation thing that consultants are selling? I think that it is a useful tool if you use it correctly under the right circumstances, but I think people treat it as a religious infatuation type of thing because they're too stupid to tell a good solution from a bad solution, which is incidentally the way that most of the world works. I have this argument that I make, and that is that the root of all evil is not money. The root of all evil is stupid people. And because stupid people is always going to get whatever you give them, no matter how a genius you are as a whatever you are, you will never be able to transfer your wisdom and knowledge in a digestible format to stupid people, because they will take your ideas and they will make them their own and use their narrow understanding of things and fuck it up anyway. That's sort of like, you imagine, it's sort of like being a parent when you try your best to teach your kids to eat properly at the table. It doesn't matter how hard you try to show them, and you over and over and over, they still mess up their entire face with food, and like you spill everywhere and so forth, because they're simply not able to do it in a better fashion. They are at that stage in their life not capable of sitting at a fancy dinner and behaving correctly. And that's the thing that happens with Scrum. It's exactly the same thing. Usually people don't understand fundamentally, not even the people who are trained in this stuff understand what good results look like. I think personally that the role of Scrum Master is a joke. It is a gigantic toy joke of a job to have, which indicates the thing that is hilarious to me. If you need a Scrum Master to do the traditional role of a Scrum Master is, well, I'm not going to dive into that, but the role of that Scrum Master basically indicates that you as a company, you lack the ability to hire a single person within the software team who knows how to basically do planning effectively. Because facilitating these sorts of meetings and facilitating the role in terms of value to the teams themselves can be done by literally anybody in that team. It is not a difficult thing to host these meetings. It's not a difficult thing to facilitate, etc., etc. This is something that any senior profile on the team should be able to do. And if you have a product owner or something like that, that is literally the sort of thing that product owner should be doing. You don't need an entire person to do that. It's not a full-time job. The one exception to this is if you are working if you use something like safe or something that is high control, where the idea is that higher management within the company needs a very granular understanding of each team, how they're delivering, what the schedule looks like, how they're progressing, etc., etc. And that's usually why you use Scrum. But the reality is that most people just use it as a default because they don't know any better. And that is that. So I really do believe, agree that it is a religious infatuation, because they see it's, as I said, it's like this magical thing you sprinkle because you on whatever process or whatever team you have, because you don't know of any other way of doing it, and that is, in my opinion, at the very least, a sign of incompetence. And as I've said in other videos, the vast majority of management within software companies are incompetent to the point where the only reason the company is making any headway whatsoever is down to the fact that the software developers themselves are usually intelligent people who are able to just produce code if they are told what they're supposed to be producing. But most of the other stuff that is happening on top, apart from that simple base thing, is completely nonsense. Most of it is. I swear to you guys, I have so far never been, and this is true for big corporations, it's true for startups, it's true for everybody, because managers and companies who are being run by non-technical people, they have the same thing as the software developers have, which is this, they have these philosopher type of idealists who don't actually know how to solve a single goddamn problem. They know is they have a lot of excess energy, and then they, just as the software developers, can get infatuated with going to a TikTok or something where they get sold an idea of functional programming, for example, and then now all of a sudden everything is not good if it's not functional programming. Well, guys, the managers and POs and so forth, they do the same thing. Holy shit, they do the same thing. And when you have people like that, this is not a matter of you are stupid or you are smart if you're a software engineer or you're a product owner or something like that. It's down to people who have, as I like to call them, people who are more about emotion. That's what they're focusing on. They are about vibes, emotion, and so forth. And then you have people who are results driven, people who look at actual results. And the people who are about results will always be it's almost always the person you want to be in charge if you're talking about something where we're talking about money, we're talking about output, something like that. Emotions types of people are much more better suited to lead in a situation where the end result is not about a measurable outcome. It is about getting people together. It's about making people feel uncomfortable, etc., etc. That is perfect. But when it comes to these sorts of practices, most of the people who are being hired into product owner roles and so forth, they are usually people who are either incompetent or people who are emotion driven, or like they just do things because it's the thing that everybody else is doing. They are very, very susceptible for peer pressure and popular opinion and things like that. But the people who get the results are usually the people you want to listen to. And Scrum and Agile it is a way to get a result, but it's not the silver bullet that people are treating it as. It's usually, in my opinion, the best time to use Scrum is if you have a clear roadmap of what's going to be delivered, you have like some type of long-term vision, and you have a known end state. You have some time in the future, when you've delivered all of these projects, now you know that you are done. If that is the case, Scrum is a very effective way for you to measure each step towards that goal. If you don't have an end goal, then Scrum is the dumbest thing that's ever made. It makes no sense, because you're basically just measuring how much progress you're making on something you don't even know where you're ending up at. And the reason why this is so important is because the reason why you're measuring things is so that somebody else can see how you're doing progress. That is the main reason. And if you don't have a manager who's looking at each, like the burn down chart or anything, depending on what tools you're using now, of course, then why are you measuring it? It's only adding stress to the developers because they have to estimate things, and it's always like you're fictively crossing a sprint, which means that by the end of that sprint, you create incentive to cut corners for the software developers when they don't have to feel that way. They can just continue doing a good job. And so the idea here is very, very good, but it's all about execution. Just as I like to tell people that if you use the wrong tool for the problem, you will never get the sort of results that you're looking for, and they're always going to... You're trying to use a hammer when you need a saw. That is what I'm actually arguing for, and that is usually what happens when people use Scrum as a default. So what I want you to take away from this is that I don't think that Agile or Scrum is a bad idea in any way. It really comes down to what type of team are you dealing with, what type of project are you dealing with, and who are you, like who is running the show, right? For a basic team, I think a Scrum Master or like things like that I agree, it is definitely something that consultants are selling and like ignorant, incompetent managers are using, because they themselves, for some reason, don't understand how to do these extremely basic things, because it does not take a full-fledged education to be a Scrum Master, guys. It's something that most of the time you can train the average software developer to do in a manner of days. It's not a complicated thing to do. It's a methodology. It's not like physics or something like that. And so in that regard, it is absolutely very common that consultants and other companies are, selling these sorts of services, because it's something that most people might either not fully understand, etc., etc. And so a lot of companies hire people like that. But they also do that for situations where it's not really needed, where a basic lean process or a basic Kanban board or something like that is much more suitable. And that is the thing that really determines whether or not someone is using, in my opinion, Scrum, Agile, etc. in the correct fashion. Because as I said, if you have a long-spanning project where you have an end state, and it's really important for you to make sure that you are steadily progressing, and you need to measure each step towards that end goal, so that you can account for any changes in velocity or things like that, add people, remove people, etc., etc. When you really want to measure things, then Scrum is a very good way of doing that. Sprints are a very good way of achieving that goal. But when you're just using it for the sake of using it, which is usually the case, you're just wasting time doing something that isn't really necessary. A lot of teams would be much better off, especially if you're working in things like DevOps or things like that, where there's like not an end project where everything is finishing or where everything's done, right? Then using Scrum is pointless, because you're measuring something with this has no end state, and nobody's probably checking how much work you are doing at each step of the way, right? You can make an argument that you can measure historically how much work is being done, but once again, it comes down to, is anybody actually checking your history, your burn down charts, etc., etc. If that's not happening, well, then you're doing Scrum because someone thought it was a neat idea, and it's not probably giving you all that much value. Have a great day.